Hey, Dave, good morning.
Morning, Carl. How are you?
I'm good.
All right.
Uh, so I'm really stoked that we're here to start talking about the 5 things that block change management and
Yeah,
go over all of the basic things on that. So can you just give a little bit of background on what we're going to be going over today?
sure I can. We're getting ready to gear up for a larger 3-hour webinar on and workshop on management of change. And really, at the heart of the whole thing is these 5 barriers to driving meaningful change in an organization. And it's a big part of the model that we use in our system prescription product that covers everything for building a proactive maintenance organization, but managing change is right up front. And if it doesn't work, everything else that you're trying to do is going to be impaired by it. So I think this short conversation and intro to what drives good, successful, and healthy change is a good place to start with that conversation.
Great. Yeah. And so for those of you who are already interested, the 5 hour or the 3 hour class will go over more in depth on this is at failureprevention.com/MOC. failureprevention.com/MOC. You can read more about it and then sign up to take that class as well. But all right. Well, I'll tell you, research says over and over again that 90% of all reliability optimization improvement initiatives fail within a few years.
That's right.
So, but people keep trying. And
Sure.
so why don't you go ahead and let's see about some of the first things that we see as barriers to getting these change management things put in.
Sure. Okay. Let me swing us over to the slide presentation here, and we'll start with that. We're going to have some other things that we'll look at as we go along here too, because one of the things we promised from the start is that we're not going to just talk about it. We're going to actually provide useful systems out there for people to use right away. So
oh yeah, and one other thing is Dave has invented a calculator for savings, and so we'll be giving you access to beginning that pretty soon. So
yep. And it's kind of got a neat history behind it. My good friend Terry Wireman built a calculator similar to it in his fantastic book on TPM, Total Productive Maintenance, and we've adapted his original idea to something that fits with our system prescription model and a little more comprehensive, covers a broader spectrum of savings out there, but really neat tool that gives you a very realistic number that'll just show you with a pretty broad stroke of the pen, I guess, what the savings could be if you change from a reactive to a proactive organization. So look forward to sharing that with you. Okay, so go ahead, Carl.
oh no, I'm ready. Let's go
Okay.
through it, man.
All right. Okay, so for this little short webinar that we're going to do here, try to set aside the interruptions and we'll jump into the content here. I'd really like to get your attention to show you the different aspects of those barriers out there. They're very practical, logical concepts.
I'm putting the cell phone on mute.
I got mine on mute too. I
All
shut
right,
it up
good.
a while ago. I got the
Yeah,
door
all
locked.
right.
And yep.
Life goes on without having to answer every call immediately. So
10-4. Yep. It's definitely part of a step-by-step recipe for being successful at managing change without a lot of drama, and a very comfortable feel to it for the leaders and the people that are part of the change. So it was designed from the ground up to be easy to apply and doesn't require you to memorize a lot of things. It's designed to take away a lot of that. So of course, the calculator tool that Dr. Hoffower mentioned, and then just again to point out, it's one of the elements of the 65 lesson system that we have called system prescription. And we have tools that go all the way from doing a benchmarking assessment at the beginning of your maintenance program transformation, all the way to advanced predictive and condition-based monitoring. So as an introduction to it, we picked out these top 5 reasons that change initiatives fail because they're the common ones out there and the ones that cause people to feel really uncomfortable about it. So it's a session for leaders of change to help their organizations go through the process in a more efficient way. So we're going to give you real and useful tools for driving change successfully. Our names are on the screen there. Dave Krings and Karl Hoffower. We're two of the principals at Failure Prevention Associates, and are happy to help with anything that relates to maintenance and reliability from beginning to end, and really look forward to speaking with some of you about that further. We do have the full workshop. As I mentioned, we're going to have some links provided along with this video when we post it. The location on our website, if you'd like to check on the latest and greatest of the dates for these sessions, is failureprevention.com/MOC. Failureprevention.com/MOC. Pretty straightforward URL. We will have other training events also listed on the page there, on the pages on Failure Prevention Associates. Dr. Karl offers fantastic vibration courses for all levels of experience. So those are some other ones you can take a look at.
Well, thanks. Yeah, the biggest thing that we want to do is our focus, our mission statement is we want to help you make decisions from a position of knowledge. So that if you know what's going on within your organization and you understand the fundamentals of what barriers of change are, you'll be able to then make the decisions to what is the next step, what tool should we apply in this situation. And that's something that I like about the way we designed system prescription, was we can write a prescription for what your particular plant needs and how you need to move forward. Dave has lots of experience in a number of different verticals, whether it's mining, power gen, pulp and paper, food service, and helping all sorts of different types of verticals get the change they need. And every plant's a little bit different. The basics are the same, but you need a good mentor that will help you. Every NBA, every NFL, every NHL, every professional sports team has a coach, and that coach is there to try to get better results from the players. And that's what Dave does, is he's a great mentor to help coach to say, this is the play you need to do in this situation. So let's get in these 5 barriers, Dave.
All right, let's jump into it. So what's the core problem? Why do we need to drive change, and why is this so hard for us? Well, it goes back to really cognitive behavioral model and the way that the human brain works. And as you might be well aware, as you go through your day at work or your personal life, your brain, the human brain, really loves systems and routines. So it takes a lot less energy to do things the same every single day. So if you drive to work the same way, or you get up in the morning and get ready for work the same way, you might find yourself sometimes going through those activities and not even remembering that you did it. And that's both scary and amazing, because it's a very low energy activity when it's become a habit like that. So habits create this low energy demand on the brain, and it craves that because it takes less energy to do it, and the brain can do other things at the same time. So for us to change requires some intentional thought, effort, and focus, which is a higher energy activity, and it requires concentration until it becomes a habit itself. So there's this gap between our habits and what we'd like to be doing that we have to kind of find a way to navigate through. And that's really what management of change is about. William Bridges, a fantastic author who wrote a book called Managing Transitions, which we'll get to in a bit, called this the journey to the new way, and or new beginning. And we'll talk a little bit about that, because he really makes a good point in his book, Managing Transitions, that it's not so much the change that's difficult, it's the transition from what we're comfortable with to what we're trying to do. So so not to go too far ahead on that, I'm going to jump into a little whiteboard example here on discretionary effort, because I want to show you all just a point here about how important it is as leaders out there that we take others with us. And it's kind of an interesting thing, because Bridges' book on managing transitions covers this in a slightly different way. But he has a concept called the marathon effect that says, if you're going to take a group with you on a journey, it's kind of like running a marathon, 26.2 miles. And as a leader who's already bought into that change, you don't need to be convinced to run the race, and you know where to go, but they don't necessarily have that level of knowledge. So in order to run the race with your team, run the marathon, you have to run at the back of the pack and make sure they all make it across the finish line. So um, that applies kind of directly to this little whiteboard example that I'm going to show you here, because uh, when we get ready to start driving change, we really want to have people engaged in the activity in a way where they do more than just the bare minimum. And if we do a poor job with managing change and we just tell people what to do, we get a characteristic curve that looks kind of like this, as I draw this on the screen with my mouse, but just shows a pattern where people are made aware of what's expected of them and they comply with it. Okay, so when they do, you get this kind of a flat curve over time, which shows that they buy in and comply with what you've requested, but they don't do a whole lot more than that. And
Exactly.
that can be a real problem because it limits your ability to improve, right? So for those
Well,
of
it's
you,
something that we see with so many people that have the flavor of the month or the flavor of the quarter or the flavor of the year, right? They've seen these programs come and go. And so,
sure,
they're going to they know what they need to do to get the job done for the bare minimum. So yeah,
yeah.
this is a great example.
And another point about that is, and for those of you that have gone out and driven change before, one of the things you'll find out is you might have that situation going on where you'll have driven some change and maybe not generated the buy-in that was needed, and people will comply with what you've requested and not do a whole lot more. Their discretionary effort is zero, right? They're just doing what you're telling them to do. But if you leave and go on vacation, you might even see a little different. Trying to get the drawing tool here to let me draw a little different view on the whole thing. It won't let me off the text tool no matter what I do. Oh, there we go. A little different thing can happen where actually when you leave, they'll stop complying because you're not there forcing them
Right.
to stay on track. So,
And that's usually what happens. In the research that I've been looking at, Reliability Web has done this survey, is these people will get some initial change and stuff, and then they'll move on. And because it's not a system or a habit, right, it crashes and then the thing fails.
yep.
Or there's just too much resistance.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the model that we're going to continue to talk about today and is in the workshop that's a little longer, we're actually shooting for a behavior model that looks more like this, where we bring people on board with us and they drive for achieving the vision and continuous improvement. And over time, their buy-in and effort continues to increase. And I mean, at first, you might not notice a big difference because you're so early in the curve down there that you can't really tell that you're having a big effect on it in those early days down there. But as time goes on, you'll find out, I'm not in this by myself anymore. And you reach critical mass and you've got a large group of people that are all driving for better results. And that's what we need to happen. So, okay, I'll jump back out of there now and into the slides.
All right. So then when people are having these types of issues, this is why knowing about where you can get the buy-in, and that's always been the biggest thing, is how do you get the buy-in? Mm-hmm. And then how do you have resistance to buy-in? So Dave, can you go a little bit more in depth on that?
Well, sure. I mean, we're all the same in that way, the way that we're built, right? So when we come to work every day, there are systems that are going on around us, and there's things that we do every day that could be our own personal systems for how we do our job, and there's a level of ownership there, whether it's a good system or not, because it's the one that we have, right? So you're defensive about it sometimes and a little protective of it, particularly if you don't understand why you're making a change or why someone would want you to. So the cognitive behavioral model that we're showing up on the screen right now plays a big role in that, and everything that's going on around us is kind of governed by this little loop there that shows that the consequences, or maybe results would be a better word for it in a lot of cases, that we get from the work systems that we have are generated from they're reinforced by our beliefs, and the beliefs then generate behaviors that generate more consequences or results, and it just kind of goes in a loop like that. And in a lot of cases, if you're working in a reactive maintenance and reliability program, it doesn't have a lot of reliability. It's mostly just fixing things over and over again, endlessly, and suffering. Um, People probably don't want that. But if you don't know how to get out of that loop, you can sometimes fall into a situation where you think that's the best it's ever going to get. And in a lot of cases, the leadership in many organizations don't have a background in cutting edge proactive reliability, and don't know that there is a better way. So um, you'll find people quite entrenched in things that could be much better, but they just need a little help to facilitate their way through it, and understand that there are other options, and that the results or the consequences can be significantly better than they are. And that's what we do every day. Dr. Karl and I and the rest of the team at FPA work on all aspects of reliability programs, and it really translates directly into production and engineering as well, because it's everybody. We're all in it together. So the way we run equipment, and the way we monitor it, and the way we care for it, the way we build it, all of those things play a role in what we get out of the end of the production process or the service process that we provide. So but what's really cool about it, and one of the things that makes me most excited about Dr. Karl and I working together, is we came from vastly different backgrounds, but came up to the same place here with this model. And it has some application, very huge application on the medical and psychology side of things, as well as industrial. And we had this discussion a while back about, are we destined to be, my word for it at the time was wired to be this way, or is this a flexible thing that we can work on, because it's a bigger thing than we thought it ever would be. And what we found is it's not cast in concrete, it's not carved in stone. The human mind is an amazingly flexible thing, and our most important tool in this effort. And there's a concept called neuroplasticity out there that and I'm certainly not an expert on the on the medical or the physiological side of it, but that gives us the ability to absorb some new concepts and move in the direction of change, and buy into it, and just continuously through our life adapt to new technologies and new ideas. And I probably didn't say that as well as you could.
No, you did fine. You did fine. I mean, the thing is that we get into being told our brain is wired a certain way, and the thing that they fail to then add on is that while the brain may be wired in that way, there is plasticity, which is the ability to change, the ability to morph into something else, and that's how you do get changes. And that's there are examples of people that have changed what they were their mind was set to. And that old adage of an old dog can't find and learn a new trick isn't necessarily true with humans, and it isn't necessarily true with canines either. It's just how are you going about teaching them, and how much you have to repeat what's going on. And that's where you'll hear about you need to do something over and over and over again. And that's where a change management expert understands that this is the resistance that you're getting to these changes, and this would be the tool to apply here in this instance with this particular group or this situation. Again, that's why I go back to why Dave Krings is an excellent mentor, and the guy who runs our entire change management and optimization programs, is because he's got that expertise to be able to understand, and in the formula of your Jenga thing, which block do you pull to get the change? And so that's why using this model is such a good starting point, because we can all agree that we all have certain beliefs, and those beliefs then gauge our behaviors, and those behaviors then get us a consequence or a result, like you were saying. Right. And that circle thing, the hard thing is that it's been working for so long here, this is good. And what they don't seem to understand, and the data shows repeatedly, if you follow these steps that Dave has put together, you will get the changes and improvements. And suddenly people say, oh yeah, I always thought we should do it like that. But there's a difference between saying it and actually getting the result, pulling that value back out of your stream. And, right now, when you talk about the ROA calculator and stuff, I want people to think about this. What is the value of your assets? And are you spending more or less than 2% of the value of your assets, the depreciable value? And that's an easy number to get you from your finance people. But if you guys are spending more than 2% of the depreciable value of your assets, then you may need our kind of help, because you've got money that you're spending that you don't necessarily have to do.
Yep, absolutely.
So, there you go. Keep going, Dave, please.
Yep. Great. I appreciate the you elaborating on that a bit. And I can think of one example, preventive maintenance. Everybody likes that. There's a lot of conversation around it, and people base their maintenance program on it quite often. And one of the things that we see a lot is you go into a plant where preventive maintenance has been taken way past where it was effective, and much of the preventive maintenance activity is not preventing anything. And I've seen facilities where we deleted 70% of their preventive maintenance tasks, and their productivity and availability went up by 30-40%, and
Right.
costs go down.
Yeah.
Stop killing your equipment.
Right. Stop messing with it and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we had that happen a few years ago where there was a bearing that failed from lack of lubrication. And we'd been telling them about it with our vibration program, but they didn't have the structure in there to give the guys time to get out there to grease it. And I was even like, give us a grease gun. But this is a remote location in the oil patch. And the bearing failed. And so the order came down, grease every bearing every week.
Right.
It's like, no, you're adding a PM that adds time, money, and isn't going to get you the results that you want, because you had this one failure and you didn't do the proper action step to resolve that failure, because they still never addressed that the guys didn't have enough time to grease it to begin with. And now they added on this order that then now they're going to not comply with, and now they're going to look even worse in their ability to get their maintenance done. So.
Righto. Yep. Great example. All right. So jumping into reason number one, the lack of tools and systems. So as a driver of change, there's nothing more intimidating than trying to drive a change and not having a good model and a good structure, or a skeleton, I guess, for lack of a better term, to work within. Makes it a lot more work for you as a leader. So the efficiency can be terrible without systems. And remember, we were talking about building habits for your brain to make it easier for you to do more things with less effort. Well, that's a big piece of our MOC process, is to give you a structure and a system that takes out a whole bunch of the hassle for you as a leader, and gives you things like forms and tools to prove that it will work, and systems to make sure that you don't miss anything, and communication methods that make sure that everyone understands. And there's a lot of psychology that falls into that too as well, because just telling someone once that something is going to be changed is not a communication plan. That is just the very beginning of it. And what we find is the vast majority of change management programs and efforts fall apart right there with not enough communication. As a leader of it, the communication that needs to happen seems like it's too much because you're already bought in. But in order to get them to buy in, and we'll show you that on a model here in a couple slides, but there are a lot of steps to driving change. But it's manageable, and the system that's behind it is easy to understand and learn. So we've already got that pretty well perfected, and it's very adaptable, very flexible, but it has enough structure that you don't need to figure it out every single time. It's standardized and real stable, gives you a lot of confidence, and it shows you the facts, which really helps a lot with buy-in, looking upward to your leadership group. But buy-in comes from understanding.
So, a lot of places have a management and MOC process, right? A management and change process. And what I think about to all those people watching this right now, if the idea of we're going to do something that has to employ the MOC process, are you happy about it? Are you neutral about it? Or do you cringe and go, oh no, this is not going to work? And if you're neutral or negative about your MOC process, then this is why you need to get the materials from Dave. This is why you need to have a true system that has the tools and shows the facts of what you need to have an understanding of what the change is going to do, how it's going to do it, how we're going to measure results, how we're going to then take feedback to make it better and better and better.
Yep. Yeah. My thinking on the whole thing is if you've got a closet like I do, full of electronic gadgets, and you have this big plastic tote bin full of USB cords and network cables all tangled up, and you can't find what you need, and there's a cord in there for your phone somewhere, that kind of thing. That's exactly what change management feels like if you don't have those systems in place. And this just lines everything up neat and tidy so you can see what to do and you don't miss anything. That's exactly why that graphic there of those paving blocks is there, just to kind of show, if you think about it, when things are orderly like that, it just feels like such a much smaller task and a lot more efficient. So
cool.
Yeah. So reason number two is a fear of failure. And funny that you brought up the Jenga model in the back there, a couple of slides back, but that one just really fits in this case, I think, because fear slows you down. It creates a sense of paralysis, and that's true for leaders as well as followers of a change. It's a little bit separated from the lack of systems directly but it is fueled by them, because you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to drive this change. Is it going to make things better, or is it not going to make things better? And when we work in the model and the documentation that we use, it kind of forces you to think about, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And what are the alternatives that we could have selected? And why did we pick the one that we did? And, what does it look like when we get there and we're all grown up and we're in this new change and it becomes our new way? And a lot of those fears fall away when you've got a structure like that. So doubt about the critical elements being missed or neglected, easily dealt with if we just make sure that those elements are all accounted for in the plan. The inability to prepare adequately feels kind of unsafe, so it's like pulling the blocks out of the Jenga tower there. It's you want to have an orderly step-by-step approach that kind of keeps the structural strength in place. And our current habits sometimes create a false sense of safety due to familiarity. So think about that. If you're working in an organization, I've worked with companies that were on the verge of bankruptcy, that were struggling to try to compete in a market where they had many things going against them. They were too small, or they were not, a lot of their equipment was obsolete, or they had really difficult time with getting talented, skilled workforce where they were located. They had issues with shipping distance to their markets, things like that. And they would still stick to their old way of doing things because it was familiar to them. And what they didn't realize is they were just, slowly dying because they weren't willing to accept that change needed to happen. So it can give you this false sense that everything's okay, but you've got a gunshot wound, and
Right.
just really caution you to recognize that this is a very competitive market out there in almost every industry and every economic culture there is out there. So the savings calculator is a really helpful tool, and let's take a look at that real quick.
Okay, good.
I have just a snapshot there of a spreadsheet with some sample data in there, but I'm going to switch over to the actual tool here. But one thing I want to mention before I do is it's in Microsoft Excel, so it should be something you can open with Excel or any of the Google app programs and things like that. If you don't use Microsoft products, would work as well. The instructions are embedded in the first tab of the spreadsheet, so I'll show you that. The second tab has a set of sample data in there, so you can kind of fiddle with that. And then the third tab is for your information in there. And it's custom made to provide justification for a proactive maintenance approach. So it's definitely targeted at a maintenance initiative. And as I mentioned before, it's kind of comprehensive. So it's looking at everything from labor costs to downtime costs to inventory cost, and then ability to increase production in there. And I will point out that the savings number at the bottom of the screen can be higher than your total maintenance cost, which makes people think sometimes that the spreadsheet's not accurate. But in fact, what it's trying to show you there is that you can create a cost center with your maintenance program by increasing production well past the cost of the program itself. So pretty awesome thing to be able to make it so that you can make money with your maintenance program.
So that's a good point, Dave, is that most people, when they think of maintenance, they think it's a cost. Some people think it can save money, and that's usually been the focus with reliability initiatives, is we're going to save money. We're going to save money, save money. I've been hearing that for over 13 years now.
Yep.
And the difference between that consistently is it's been a cost for so long, people don't believe that it can actually save them money, and let alone that concept saying, wait a minute, it can be a profit center? You're nuts. This thing has always been a cost and there's no way to change it. And so that's some of the intrinsic stuff about getting people to move to more proactive maintenance program is they don't believe it. Right. So that's why this savings calculator is fantastic for you people to use. And you can find it if you go to failureprevention.com/MOC, there'll be a link there for you to be able to download the calculator if you just want to get the calculator. But this will give you some hard evidence to be able to look, are we spending greater than or less than 2% of the value of our assets on maintenance? And if you're spending more than 2%, you need to be looking at what you can do to change that. And this management of change program that we have, along with our system prescription program, is the proven method for people to be able to get results and get that money back. We're not saying you're going to shortchange or decrease the maintenance. What you're going to do is you've got a targeted approach that gives you that ability to spend the dollars when needed, but do it in a way that gets more production. And I think, Dave, that's the thing that's fascinating about this, is how you can optimize so quality improves. I mean, you were telling me about that one cereal company where, you know, they were well behind the leaders, and then with your program, you were getting them not just better maintenance flows, but better production. Then they could tweak quality. When they tweaked on quality, they also get more production. So you got a better product for less costs, and overall drove all that change in there with just these simple steps. It's pretty fascinating.
Yep. And a couple of other things that really surprise people are directly linked to it is safety performance in organizations that are proactive is much higher than it is in a reactive organization. And if you think about it, it makes sense. The operations are typically cleaner. They have fewer surprises. They're down less of the time. They're more orderly in their planning, so people don't get hurt. It has better environmental compliance if you're dealing with any waste streams whatsoever. I mean, less rework reduces emissions as well. And it just gives you a lot of great results that you wouldn't expect, including lower insurance costs because fewer people get injured and they're healthy and happy.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so when you get into the spreadsheet, the first tab, which is labeled instructions, just tells you that you enter information into the cells highlighted in yellow, and it tells you that there are instructions embedded in those cells. So it doesn't take a lot of training to use it, but if you go into the example view, you see that the tabs are broken out, or the sheet is broken out into equipment downtime savings, labor savings, inventory and storeroom savings or warehouse savings, and major outage and overhaul savings. And as I mentioned on the previous tab, the yellow fields are the ones that you want to enter data into. And on the ones that are not explained by the title on the tab or on the line itself, for example, gross annual sales is something that you'll have for your organization, so I don't need to explain that. But annual labor costs, if you mouse over the field, you'll see there that it's got a little red triangle in the upper right corner, and I explain in there that what we want there is the total annual production labor costs for all roles, not maintenance labor here. So we're actually isolating your production labor in that calculation. So it tells you specifically what to put in there. For the ones with a percentage in there, annual percentage of maintenance downtime, it explains to you based on what measurement and what basis. There are a few of them in there that are bracketed kind of answers. So for example, line 7 says percent improvement possible through improved maintenance controls. And we give you some suggested numbers in there. So in the case of this percent improvement possible, it says 0 to 10% would be typical if you have good maintenance practices already in place. And we have a benchmarking tool to help you understand in system prescription whether you have good maintenance practices in place or not. But until you get that, you can certainly make some judgment calls of your own on that. And it's kind of fun to play with this and kind of run the numbers in a conservative and maybe more aggressive approach to get some, like a high and low figure in there.
Yeah.
Yep. And then of course, down toward the bottom of that number, it says 20 to 30% if you have a weak or informal system in place. So for example, if you're using a telephone to report work requirements and people are just keeping notes on 3x5 cards, I would call that a weak system. And you've got a lot of room for improvement there. So your savings are going to be higher. But anyway, that's kind of the short version of it there. You can just answer the questions. The explanations are there if you need them, and you'll get a number out the bottom. And then the third tab is exactly the same, just blank for your use. So hope you enjoy that, and it gives you some motivation really to drive change, because the numbers can be enormous.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, I didn't realize that you had the your figures there. So the example page, please don't mess with that. Keep that for your example, and then use that third tab for your own numbers. And when you run those numbers, you may see something that seems incredible. But again, that's because if your viewpoint has been that maintenance is a cost, not that maintenance can save money, or the best, highest world-class programs, maintenance actually becomes a profit center, because maintenance is there with the information to help you improve your process, decrease the damage you're accumulating on your systems, and optimize it so you get more production out of it for less dollars.
Yep.
That's what the ultimate goal is that. So when you see those numbers, we have the case studies to back it up that this is the exact way that you guys can get these improvements, solidify those gains, make standard operating procedures for everyone to follow, get it into everybody's habit so that it becomes the way they run things now versus the way they always ran it before. And then you guys will see these huge savings. All right, what's next?
Kind of along those lines, one more comment on the savings is we have seen pulp and paper facilities go from $270 a ton for maintenance costs down to $43 a ton using this method exactly. We've had some mining operations that went from $6 a ton in maintenance costs down to $2.36 a ton. In one case, I quoted that number to a maintenance manager in the facility, and he said, "That is impossible." He said, "Where did that happen?" And I said, "Right here where you're working." And the plant had been sold, but I had worked with the previous owner, and their costs were back up near $5.50 a ton when I was back helping them for a second time. So it was just deja vu all over again. But
right,
it was a great
things. I think in that great example is that it got sold, and the new owners just came in and started saying, we're going to change everything, and they threw out the systems. And so they went back to, you can always go back to what you did the old way, and that's fine. Yep. And then your costs go right back up, and that's money just flying out the door that they don't need to be spending. That's yep. That was the most amazing part. You know, there was a figure, and I can't recall if it was Terry or I have the book right over there. But the point is that, you know, I'll give the reference to the person, or maybe we'll put that in the video at the bottom on here. But if you can return $10 million to your company because you have better maintenance practices, you know, you're more optimized, you're only doing PMs that you really need to do, and you only have the inventory on hand of the actual parts that you need versus an entire spare plant, because you don't know it's going to fail, you don't know what's going to go wrong.
Yep.
When you can return $10 million, the thing that was amazing to me is how much capital would a plant have to spend to produce $10 million in profit? And it's humongous. It's absolutely a massive number that people will spend. You know, they'll spend $80 to $100 million just to be able to generate $10 million. They'll get their money back, but you know, that extra $10 million, if you can optimize your system, be able to return that money, and be confident that you're not going to put yourself in a bind. I think that's the thing where you go back to the previous slide on fear, is the fear of the unknown. And so if you have fear that you have changes, or you reduce your inventory and you don't know what's going on, you don't think that that's going to work, that fear is coming because you don't have a system, you don't understand what your requirements are, you don't have a good criticality set up, you don't have a good PM system set up, and it could be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So.
And on the inventory one, my good friend Kevin Luton from Met Demand, he and I have worked on some projects on inventory control in the past, and he always used to say, and I think it's true, is the more inventory you carry, the more likely you don't have what you need. Yeah, I found that to be true throughout my work career for sure. Just gets sloppier the bigger it gets. So, okay, so let's jump ahead a little further. Reason number 3 that changes something that fails very often is conflict and resistance to that change. And I guess change is a journey that has to be planned just like any other work. So we utilize the same planning mechanism that we do for planning repair work to manage change. And people don't automatically get on board. And William Bridges' book, Managing Transitions, is truly one of my favorites out there. I highly encourage you pick that one up. And it's not real thick. It's a real easy read. It has some awesome graphic examples in there. And I think he just has his finger really on the pulse of change, regardless of it being in maintenance or not. He's not a maintenance guy at all. But we'll take a look at a slide after this one. But I wanted to mention, I was telling Dr. Hoffower before we started the call this morning about a little example during the American Revolutionary War. In the early days of the war, the rebel troops on the American side were not well trained. I mean, they were all, frontiers people and farmers, but didn't really have any military discipline whatsoever. And George Washington brought in a military expert from the Prussian army, Baron von Steuben, to help train the troops. And he was just flabbergasted at the conditions that they were working under and how little discipline they had. And they were really kind of unteachable in his mind. And he was just really struggling. And one of the parts of it was they were in their own way because everyone wanted to be their own boss, right? And it was typical of that freedom movement at the time. As his words for it was, we have all generals and no privates.
Right.
And that was tough for him, but he finally was successful, and really was a big part of why they were able to win the war. And he came to talk to General Washington at one point in time and said, "Eureka, they need to know why." And what he had figured out was, as freedom-minded and liberty-minded as these troops were, they had to know why they were being told to do things, not just blindly follow the leader's directions. And I think that's true to the modern day. Most people that are out there working in the world, and certainly very true for the newer generations out there. Millennials, for example, get teased about it quite a bit, that they're very independent and like to know why they're being told to do things or asked to do things. And I don't think that's unique to them. But so let's take a look at the model. And then this is adapted right from Bridges' book. But the diagram, I think, is a really important one. And he explains in the book in a way that really never occurred to me until I read it and saw this diagram, why it's so hard to drive people in the direction of this new beginning or change. So just for navigation purposes, if you look at the diagram here, on the y-axis is just increasing acceptance, and on the x-axis, just the passage of time. And for those of us that are driving change, we're in the white section near the top called the new beginning. And you can see really from time 0, we're already basically accepting of the change. Well, that would be true because we're driving the change we want, right? So we're early adopters. But the rest of the organization, and in most cases, it's the majority of the people, are in 2 other areas. And the first group is kind of in that sort of a steel gray colored area called the neutral zone. And those folks are open to suggestion, and they're interested in whatever you have to say, but they're not bought in yet. And they're not necessarily bought into the current system either. So maybe a little rebellious at times, and maybe not totally the most trustworthy to follow the current systems, quite honestly. And that's not always a bad thing, because you do want people to question things all the time. So but those people are the ones that are going to gravitate first toward acceptance and move into the new beginning and make that group grow larger as time goes on. But you have to do a good job communicating with them, explaining to them why we're doing it, what's in it for them, what they're going to have to give up to go there. I mean, there's always some downside. There's a grieving process that goes along with letting go of the old way. But they're truly the people that are most likely to come in the direction you need them to go in the early days. Down in the lower left, this ending, losing, letting go group in the dark blue region is a large group that's entrenched in the old way of doing things. So at first, and you can see it reflected in the x-axis, is near the top there, the curve doesn't change at all for a period of time. And all that's saying is you're communicating what you want to do and you're doing all the things right, and they're not listening. They haven't heard you the first, second, third, fourth time it's said, but maybe by the seventh or the ninth time they do. And then they start to gradually move in your direction. But where do they go first? Into the neutral zone, right? They don't buy in at first. They're still kind of not sure. So as a leader out there, we can fall into the trap sometimes of the ones that are fighting us the most. We'll burn all of our energy up trying to convince them to move into the neutral zone, and we won't take care of the neutral zone itself. And what'll happen is they never accept, and you just end up with a bunch of people that are confused and maybe not outright fighting you. Some might be, but it's really important to take really good care of the neutral zone folks and keep moving them over, and do a good job with the communication, and let those folks that are more resistant move kind of naturally into the neutral zone as time goes on. And if you do a good job with all the things that are built into our system, you'll have very few people left near the end that are not bought in.
Right.
I'm not going to tell you it's zero. You're going to have to deal with them as a manager if you can't get them to change. But it's important that you do a good job. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of them, and then you're going to have real problems.
Well, something I've been advising some of the people we've been working with on closing some changes for some new deals and newer clients is something will come up, and one of the guys on our team would be like, I told them that before. And the rule is it's not what you say, it's what people hear.
Yeah.
Right. And so in this thing that when it comes to motivation on people, if they've navigated themselves to a position of leadership or a position of supervising, or even just being a lead on a maintenance group, they've lived in this system, they've navigated this system, and so they understand what the roles, responsibilities, what the freedoms and the barriers are to this system. And when you try to bring in a new system, it challenges them, and they don't want that change because they can get successful. It might not be great success, but it's been, quote, working for them. And I think that's the part of this that needs to be understood is the people that want this change, that buy into these systems, the reason why they fail so often is because, like you're showing here in the graph on the top left corner, it's a very small percentage of the group. And this leadership is what you're doing to expand that group and move it over. And I think that's great is you don't concentrate on the people that are just complaining, that are resisting, because you have other people that are neutral. And if you can keep getting them moving forward, then you get building more momentum and you get more buy-in, and you'll get those other people coming over. So great slide to go over these things on the journey. And it really is it's a long commitment to this.
Yep, thanks. It's critical mass is kind of the term that comes to my mind there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, credit to Dr. Bridges on his book there. It's a good one. Okay, so reason number 4 is change is hard. Well, we've really talked about some of those difficulties going in here, but change is work, and it's much easier to do with the right tools. So we're trying really hard to give you the tools to alleviate some of that extra workload and make it go smoothly. And I think you'll find that that it does exactly that, and so does the whole system prescription process for proactive maintenance as well. You don't need to invent it from nothing. Many of the best practice body of knowledge tasks out there that need to be done are all really scripted out and built in the order that they need to happen for you. But the rewards of change help us to work together. So we spend a lot of time on building ways to recognize movement in the right direction and celebrate those. And the difficulty lies in the transition and the habit building, as I mentioned before. And this is a temporary state until you get to that habit level of performance, but you don't want to get lost along the way. And that's a big piece of why we use the systems that we do. So leaders with systems come to the rescue in that case. Okay, so reason number 5 is it could get worse, right? The unknown, we're concerned about that. So the changing without a plan is dangerous and uncertain. So we'll use a plan. That's really the answer. It's managed change that includes planning for the surprises that will happen. And one of the things that's in our communication planning model is to acknowledge to the people that are driving the change with you and going through the change that there will be things that aren't going to go the way we expect them to. And then a good discussion about what will we do if, something goes horribly wrong. And sometimes that does happen. But you gain so much credibility with the people if you tell them this could happen, and if it does, here's what we're going to do about it, and that you're paying attention as well, and also open to change.
Right.
Um, so communication ensures that the team is ready for problems, and communication is almost always inadequate during change, and we talked about that just a little bit before. So I show a little clip on the bottom of the page here of the change management requests description form here, and I'm going to jump over to the document itself, because I want to show you that this template that we've designed, definitely keyed toward managing change for maintenance and reliability, but could easily be adapted to just about anything. But we've built the form so that it asks the change manager things that are pertinent to the work at hand. In other words, is it going to be a permanent thing or a temporary thing, which does happen? Tests and trials, for example. Does it require downtime? And then just straightforward text, description of what you propose to do, the objectives that you might have, the reasons that you want to make the modification, alternatives you considered, and then just comments, and there's a place to sign off. And then the rest of the document goes through a very regimented structure, and some of these will not be relevant to everything. So if it has no safety, environmental, or process safety management impact, then page 2 of the form would not be necessary. But I want to just touch a little bit on process safety management right now, because not everyone has an area that's regulated by the government, but we do work with clients all over the place in many different fields, petrochem, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, where they use ammonia chillers, pulp and paper facilities. They're using chemicals and compounds that are explosive, poisonous, dangerous in lots of different ways that are regulated under process safety management. And this tool is very useful to them because it avoids doing something dangerous because someone wasn't paying attention. They've got a very prescribed model for how they manage change of anything in those processes, other than replacement of something that's like for like. So.
Well, actually, what I'd say in that is, in my experience here, it's mainly in power gen and petrochemical, is that their MOC process is cumbersome, it's punitive, and it doesn't work well. So they end up just doing an in-kind change, and they don't try to go for any improvements because their MOC process is so restrictive. And so that's why I think that using this approach, if you're in a PSM covered system, or you have equipment that has highly hazardous chemicals that are covered under PSM regulations and the EPA's regulations for RMP, is that take a look at this form and see how it can help you have a smoother, more agreeable, easier MOC process.
Right. Yep. Thank you. So many of these forms are just asking you questions. Does the proposed modification introduce, alter, or affect any of the following? And it just goes through this long laundry list of, does it affect the startup and shutdown procedure? Does it affect routine operation and inspection? Does it affect abnormal or emergency operation? Does it affect means of escape? Does it affect PPE requirements? It's just very comprehensive. And as it goes on, there's other areas covered in there, and then it switches over to risk factor assessments and talking about how likely is it that it could cause some of these issues, and what are we going to do to mitigate it. And there are approver signatures throughout here from people that are qualified to decide if we've got this MOC process nailed down or if more work is needed. So this form is used early on before you make the change to make sure that all of the things that could cause you problems are addressed before they happen. So it goes through, there's an implementation checklist. So how many people have worked in places where you implemented a change but did a terrible job of going through startup, checkout, and commissioning, and there were people out there trying to operate this new process that never were trained or had no idea why things were the way they were, or couldn't find things, there was no documentation, stuff like that. That's virtually impossible with a system like this, where it asks if you've covered all of those different things, and the drawings have been updated, the manuals have been provided, correct people trained, there's statutory things on here. So not to bore you with going through a form page by page, but this thing has got it all pretty well covered, and it's certainly adaptable to pretty much any situation with just simple changes. So
we have the ability to take these forms and put it onto a digital format so they can be pushed in and out of a CMMS so that you can use it with Maximo or SAP, things like that. So.
Yep, very good point. Yep. Useful tool, and can be in a format that works with your systems out there. So, okay, so that's really the long and short of what we were going to cover on the short webinar today. And like I said, the 3-hour workshop covers in a lot more detail what's going on behind the scenes on these, how to use them, how to build the communication plan and execute really good change without a lot of suffering, and with really spectacular results, and a level of confidence for you as a change manager that's much better than just figuring it out for yourself. And I'd like to invite you to join us for that workshop. And this slide that's posted on the screen right now, the next one is October 21st, but that web page I mentioned earlier, failureprevention.com/MOC, always has up-to-date dates for upcoming workshops on the MOC topic.
Absolutely. So yeah, just failureprevention.com/MOC. You can get the data to be able to get the class on the upcoming dates. So, but we've got this one on the 21st. So, and if you go ahead and register for that, you'll also get the forms. You'll get both the ROI calculator and the management of change forms. If you are interested in talking about how we can put this on a digital format for you guys to put into your CMMS, whether it's Maximo, SAP, or Infor, or one of the other, with the things, one of the other systems there, we can help you do that as well. So, Dave, thanks for reviewing all of this and going over these 5 key points. I know some people say, well, gosh, I like this, but I need more meat. Well, that's why we have the 3-hour class. There's nothing you can do in a 1-hour review over it. These are the 5 basic steps, but if you want more of the meat and you want to get a chance to talk with Dave, go ahead and sign up for the workshop at failureprevention.com/MOC. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later.
Take care.